Alright, we are getting ready to do some basic stitching. So, putting the yarn onto the needle is definitely step one. Your needle has a pointed end, which for us, not too pointy, and it has a hole in the needle called the eye. Two ways we're going to work on getting our yarn into our needle. Number one, we're just going to try to put it on just like any other way of stitching. So our eye of our needle is pretty big, and most of the yarn will just fit right through there, and I'm going to pull. So I'm pulling so I have just a tiny little tail. If you are struggling getting your needle on that way, second choice is to make a loop in your yarn. Twist that yarn to get it skinny, and I'm going to do the same method. I'm trying to get it into the eye. Sometimes if I slide my needle back and forth like I'm cutting, it will come through and I can pull it. This way will help so your yarn does not fray or unravel. Again, I always just want a little tail on that end, and I am knotting my needle on by crossing those two pieces of yarn like I would tie my shoe and bringing that tail through the loop of my needle and pulling. So that's a pretty loose knot. If you would rather have a double knot, I'm just going to repeat. Make that hole, pull the tail through, maybe, and there's a double knot. That needle will more than likely not come off of that yarn. So that is getting your needle onto your yarn. We are ready to start with the most basic stitch called a chain stitch. For our room, our art room, we are going to end up taping the backside. So this is not something that we have to worry about tying knots right now. So I am always going to start on the back side. So I think of this as my pool. I am right now going from under the water, and I'm coming up getting some air. As I'm getting some air, I am pulling this yarn all the way till I can see just a tiny little tail on that back side. Now, for us, we're just going to tape this down. Nobody's going to see the back side of that. I'm not worried about making knots. This is going to be my very icky, not nice side. So, a running stitch. I am now on top of the water, ready to go back in and dive under the water. So I'm thinking about just trying to keep a straight line for this video. You might have a curved line or an outline that you're following. So I'm going to try to keep it even. That means I might count the squares that I'm going down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my needle pokes down into the fabric or the paper, and I pull, 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 pull that yarn all the way down under the pool. Okay? Now a running stitch has a space between it. So my needle is underneath. You can see I poked it up there, but I'm trying to count a couple of spaces, whatever it might be, 1, 2, 3, and my needle's going to come up above the water, and I pull, 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 pull. I feel like I have some yarn back here. I need to pull some more, and then I'm going to dive back down. So for this video, I'm counting 5, and then I go down, and 2 holes, and I come back up, pulling every time. So, a little trick to make this go faster. Your needle does not have to go all the way down and up every time. So I went 5, then I'm going to count 2 and bring my needle up, and then I might count 5 and 2. And I haven't really done any stitching with my yarn, but you can see my needle has woven, gone in and out. Now I have a couple of those done, I can pull my yarn through. So this is called a chain stitch because it's just going in and out. Very simple way to outline. So I'm going to do a couple more, counting about 5 and 2, 5 and 2, and I pull it through. When you have run out of yarn, or you've finished going the direction you want, and you want to be done, you always want to end on the back side. So I'm going to bring this needle down to the back side of the fabric. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do a little cut, leaving a tail. And then for us, I'm just going to tape that back side down. There's my chain stitch. Alright, the next stitch we're going to learn is something called a back stitch. So again, I'm starting under the water, coming up, pulling my needle, pull, 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 till I have just a little tail. That back side's already getting messy. That's okay. Little piece of tape, I'm going to tape that tail down. And now a back stitch. For a back stitch, I'm going to go about 5, and I'm having to poke through that tape. Got a little tricky. Still poke through the tape fine. So my needle's going back down under the water, pulling, pulling, pulling. And now for a back stitch, I'm going to come up again, but instead of going forward like I did in my running stitch, for a back stitch, I'm going to go backwards, and I'm going to go back down into that hole and pull. So you can see the difference. I don't have a space in between my stitches. So again, I'm under the water, trying to keep that line straight. I come up, I pull, and I go back down, going backwards. So that gives me a really nice solid outline. Trying to keep my line straight, so you're going to want to try to keep your line straight or following the outline that you are going to be doing. A couple more and you can kind of see the idea of the running stitch versus the back stitch. And again, when you're finished, you want to end on the back side, leave a little tail when you cut, tape that down, and there you have it. Going a little crooked, so I was not keeping that straight. So you just want to make sure you're following the line that you have. Our next stitch is going to be a diagonal stitch, and you can also turn this diagonal stitch into a cross stitch. So always starting at the back, pulling my yarn through till I have that tail, and I'm taping it down. So my diagonal stitch is literally a diagonal line. So instead of going up or going over, I'm going to go diagonal. When I have that diagonal line, I'm looking on the back side and I'm feeling where I just came down, and I'm going to try to go right below it. This is kind of a guessing game, so I'm trying to keep this line lined up with the bottom where I went in, and also keeping it lined up right here. So I'm pulling straight up. Got a little snag there. Pulling until I can't pull anymore. And then I have some options. I can continue that pattern and go diagonal. Trying to keep it in line with that one. And I can pull down. So you can see where I'm starting to get a really nice diagonal stitch. So I'm feeling right now where I kind of came up right there, and I'm following that on my fabric or my paper and looking to see, is it lined up right here? That's pretty good. I'm going to pull it up, and then I'm going to continue that diagonal line. So if you like the way this looks, awesome. If you want to make it look a little bit different, I'm going to go backwards and create a cross stitch. So again, I just came up right here. I'm going to follow this down to the corner, and it's like I'm making a box. I have the diagonal corners this way. Now I'm going to match up the diagonal corners going the other way. So instead of continuing my pattern diagonally, I'm going to go backwards. Looking that I have a box shape starting. I can see exactly where my needle needs to go right here. Pulling up all the way through, and I go back down. So there's my diagonal stitch turned into a cross stitch. ending on the back side, flipping it over, cutting a little tail, and holy moly am I getting lots of tape there. So I'm going to try to tape not on top of all that other tape because it's getting really thick, and if I have to stitch through it, it's going to be a problem. Alright, we are on to a chain stitch. So in a chain stitch, starting from the back, pulling up till I have just a little tail on that back side. I'm going to tape that tail down. This time I am going to go down that same hole I just came up. And as I pull, I want to leave a little loop. Now my needle is going to follow my outline or follow my straight line. So I'm going to go over a couple of those stitches. And as I pull my needle up, I'm going to loop it through that string and connect them. I'm going to continue. I'm going to go down that loop that hole I just went in, pull, leaving a little loop. I like to look where I'm going, so I kind of move that loop over, find the hole I'm going to come up, and then I loop my needle through that hole of yarn. So you can see how this is starting to look like a chain. So I go back down the hole I just came up, but as I'm pulling, I leave that loop. I like to see the direction I'm going, so I move that loop to the side. Come up, put my yarn on my needle, and pull. Down that hole, and I just continue that pattern. And through. Whenever I'm done with the stitch, I'm going to end it on the back side. So I stop, leave a little tail, tape it down. Alright, the last stitch I'm going to show you is something called a satin stitch. So this is how you're going to cover a large area with just yarn. So starting from the back, pull it through. I'm going to tape that edge. And a satin stitch. Basically, I'm going to go up and down right here, filling this area with solid brown yarn. So I'm making a straight line, and then I'm going to go right next to where I just came down, and I'm going to go next to that bottom spot. So as I'm doing this, I am going right next door to that one I just came down. I am not going to the top because that's going to use more yarn on the back side. So right next door and next to the top. Just came down the top. Now I'm going to go up by the top, down from the bottom. So as I flip this over, you're not going to see much on the back side. You're seeing just the top and the bottom. That yarn is not filling in back here because I'm going to the bottom and I just finished at the bottom. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is just a great way to fill a solid spot. If you're doing an animal, it might be their eye area or a pattern on their fur. So this is called the satin stitch. When you're done, always on the back, leave a tail, tape it down.